Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And yes, we are on page 19. We're at the very bottom paragraph where it says of necessity. Now, as we were trying to figure out where we stopped last week, I was like, that's not a natural stopping point. The paragraph above is. But regardless, let's put this paragraph into context. And as I do that, it'll help you find page 19, bottom paragraph of necessity. So, which I know I'm not good for giving a lot of time to find this stuff. So what were we talking about on page 19? What they were talking about was 12-step work. And what they were noticing and what their lived experience, and that they were the first 180 members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and what they experienced was one alcoholic carrying the message to another alcoholic was effective. It was working. Hopeless alcoholics were getting well and staying well. They were staying sober, and they were experiencing what is the solution that is outlined in this book. But they noticed that, one alcoholic helping another was absolutely effective. But there were people in cities and towns nearby, and they knew the fatality and the hopelessness of this illness, and people were dying because they didn't have this opportunity. They didn't have what had been found here. And so what they decided was to write a book. Now, I'll point something out, is that was not a simple, easy decision, and they had a couple other ideas rocking and rolling at the same time. One of the things they wanted to do was they wanted to have paid 12-step members. Thank goodness they didn't get the money for that, to have that rocking and rolling. They also were like, let's build a hospital. You know what they don't like? Hospitals, alcoholics, let's do our own hospital. And they had actually looked at some property in Akron, Ohio, like some houses and stuff. And guess what? They didn't get the money for that. So what they did was they wrote a book. And the book was meant to carry this message so the message wouldn't get lost, and to give us the directions of what was working in Akron and New York. And it's an interesting thing because honestly, we would not have had this book if it had not been for Hank Parkhurst. He was pushing. He was like, let's go. We'll write the book. It will get enough money on this bad boy. We'll be able to finance the other stuff. Guess what? They had to scrape together money. They did not get the money they thought. When the book went out to the world, it wasn't the bestseller that they hoped it would be. And they weren't able to afford all their other ideas and all their other projects, which is another example of how often God, a higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe, knows better than I know for myself. Often what I want gets in the way of what I need. And how true is that for the history of Alcoholics Anonymous? But how true is that for my life? Goodness gracious, I think I need him to be happy. I think I need this job, this situation, this person. How wrong I was. So they're talking about this volume, this book that we are reading and studying and hopefully experiencing together. And so as we get into of necessity, what we're talking about is the nature of this book. So of necessity, which is to say, unfortunately, we're going to have to, there will have to be discussions of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. Oh boy, it's really easy to go right off the crag, right off the cliff, down the escarpment with all of those sorts of things. Nothing's more casual than talking about matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. Why, that's casual small talk. I'm being facetious if we haven't gathered. That's usually like those do not talk about conversation avoiders. Yikes. And it says we are aware that these matters are from their very nature controversial. So that these are places where we have as human beings, a lot of strong opinions and beliefs. And we're saying, hey, we know we might talk about some of these things, and these things are controversial. It says nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. So we're trying to communicate in such a way where there is no contention, there is no argument. We're not trying to step on anyone's toes. Now, this is a line that I think was true when it was written and has become more and more true as the years have gone by. It says most of us sense that a real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Now, that idea of being useful, that's a theme that we're going to see throughout this book. That my goal is to be useful, is to be helpful. Not to fix, not to manage, not to save, not to cure, but to be helpful. And when we get to the third step, what we're going to do is we're going to make a decision. And that decision is that we are going to work for God. We are going to do the best we can to do God's will. Spoilers, how do we do that? The 12 steps as laid out in this book, Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how we do that. But that idea of I want to be of use. And if we're here today, well, I was going to say if we're here today and we're trying to sponsor others, but honestly, if we're here today, full stop, I believe that we're called to be of use to others. And how do I do that? Well, unfortunately, it's going to require some tolerance for their shortcomings. And I'm going to point it out. That might sound like a real tall order. That might sound, oh, girl, you want me to have tolerance for other people's shortcomings? I will gently point out that everyone is having tolerance for ours, Just going to throw I know, shortcomings? I would never, right? And to show up with that spirit of respect, that tolerance, that respect. And if you guys are probably familiar with the saying, love and tolerance of others is our code. And we find that right before we delve into the 10th step promises. And we kind of throw that around a little, like love and tolerance. And here's my experience with that. Usually when I'm being annoyed, which I know would never happen. I know you guys never experience annoyance. I think what I've got to do is I've got to match that annoyance with tolerance. And I just got to put up with that. But that's not my experience. I have a hard time matching annoyance with tolerance. So what do I have to do? Well, right before the 10th step promises, it says love and tolerance. And here's my experience. If I lead with love, the tolerance will follow. That, at least for me, is the order. And again, if you're here, you're like, girl, what? Girl, what? You want me to do a what now? What I want to just also illuminate is this idea that a lot of times I can't pull love out of my butt or tolerance out of nowhere. I need God's help. And really, my experience is the purpose of these 12 steps is to clear away the stuff inside of me that is blocking me from this power. And then God's love can flow through me. God's tolerance can flow through me. God's patience can flow through me. But this is what is asked of me to be effective in helping others. And that's what I'm called to do, to be effective in helping others. And there's a number of reasons why. The first is the fatal nature of this illness. There are people who will die if they do not find the solution that we have found. If they don't have the spiritual awakening that is promised to each and every one of us, if I'm willing to do the work to receive it. Now, the next line at the very top of page 20, this is also why. And this is a vitally important line. Highlight, underline, stars beside it. If you want to draw a unicorn or a capybara, this is where you do it. Draw attention to this line. It says, our very lives as ex-problem drinkers. So my very life is dependent upon this. So our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. You ever hear it's a selfish program? I don't know about that. I don't about that? My very life as an alcoholic is dependent about me thinking of you. And a constant thought, not a once in a while. Not when Netflix has asked me, are you finished watching? Not, not when, I've doom scrolled for 3 hours and I'm like, wait a minute, I stick my head above water. It's like, wait a minute, but constant thought of others and how I might help meet their needs. Now, if our thoughts are towards other alcoholics, the main need that they have, that I needed and I still need today is a spiritual awakening, a conscious contact with the power greater than myself, and how I get it is the 12 steps. And so can I offer them that? And of course, friendship, and of course, fellowship, and of course, kindness, and of course, respect, and of course, empathy. And, there's sometimes we offer more, but can I think of how I can be of service to others? Can that be the posture of my heart? Can that be the way I orientate myself in the world? And when I do that, the world changes. And if you're here today and you're like, I don't know how. Of course, we can force it, we can push it, we can try it, and please do. But I want you to know that change will happen as we take this course of action. That change of orientation towards what about me to what about you and what about God. That will happen as I take these 12 steps. One of the most sure signs of a spiritual experience is the desire to go help somebody else. That's throughout any faith tradition in the world, not just a silly band of drunks that are hanging out on Zoom. Any faith tradition in the world, the most sure sign is the desire to go help somebody else. So it says you may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Was that my experience? Was my experience that once I started to drink, I could not control the amount that I took. And I drank beyond lines in the sand. I drank into consequences. I drank into pain. I drank into suffering. I drank into loss. And I went back to it again and again and again. Is that my experience? I can hold that up, that mirror to my own experience. And it says, doubtless, you are curious to discover how and why in the face of expert opinion to the contrary. So the expert opinion is that alcoholics die. We die drunk or we die sober and killing ourselves. Like that is kind of the options for an untreated alcoholic. And again, we don't just have to take the expert's word on it. I don't know if you guys remember that show, Reading Rainbow. I just had LeVar Burton in my brain, but don't take my word for it. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about, and I'm so sorry I mentioned it. This is like Reading Rainbow. Take a look. It's in a book, Reading Rainbow. Sorry. The attention span, yeah, you got it. The attention span that I don't have just left. Alrighty. So, we don't have to just take the expert's opinion on it. We can look at our own experience with this illness, all the things that we've tried to get sober, to stay sober, to control our drinking, to moderate our drinking, all of those things. I'll be honest, I'm so glad you guys are all here today. It's a privilege to be able to be of service in this way. I genuinely care about all of you. But I also know that I am the last resort of the truly desperate. You're not hanging out with me if you got another option. This is not like, oh, what a fun way to spend a Wednesday. No, you're in trouble if we're hanging out. At least that's been my experience. So we see that, I don't have a solution for this thing. And it says, so doubtless you are curious to discover how and why in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered. And that is the message of hope, recovered. Now, if you're here today and you hear that word recovered and it makes things sort of bubble up in you, or you find that makes you bristle with antagonism. We'll talk about what that means later, but we get annoyed with that. We get frustrated with that, where it's like, I'm not recovered. I'm never cured. Hold on a minute. We see recovered throughout this book again and again and again. And the word recovered does not mean cured, but the word recovered describes the state that we see in the 10th step promises. And that is the state at which the obsession of the mind has left. And it is left as the result of this course of action. So we're living in a position of neutrality where the thought to drink is gone, but here's the reality of recovered. I always will have the allergy. There will never be a time when I could ever safely drink again. I got the allergy, I got the allergy. So recovered does not mean I don't have the allergy. But here's the other thing. To be recovered, if I stop taking this course of action, if I become complacent, and I stop doing step 10, step 11, working with others, that erosion of the actions that are outlined in this book that allow me to live in a state of grace, the obsession of the mind will come back, and I will drink again. So recovered does not mean cured, but recovered is talking about that state where I am free, contingent on the actions that I'm willing to take on a daily basis to bring about the spiritual awakening and to deepen the spiritual awakening, to seek new awakenings. That's what it means to be recovered. And that is the hope that we have on offer. Not just don't drink today. Just don't take a drink and you won't get drunk and it's fine and I'm just not drinking. Woohoo! Because man, if you're like me, you know that ain't happening. Like, right? So that's what we're talking about. We have recovered, and that's the hope. And it says from a hopeless, and I always want us to emphasize that word hopeless, because it is only from that place of hopelessness that I'm willing to accept the hope. I need to get to hopeless before I grab a hold of hope. So a hopeless condition of mind, and if you're writing in your book today, the hopeless condition of mind is the obsession of the mind. And what that is specifically, and hold on, I was going to say welcome, we're on page 20, but there's somebody else that just got let in the waiting room, and so welcome, we're on page 20. I hope they got their audio on. I was trying to time it to be effective, and it wasn't effective. Spoilers. Alrighty. So a hopeless condition of mind, that is the mental obsession, and that singularly is the thought that I have when I am sober, but my illness is untreated, that tells me I can drink again. That thought that tells me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. My problem was drinking with people in Canada, but we're hanging out in the UK. It'll be different this time. A thought that looks like I just got to get it out of my system. A thought that looks like I hate myself. I hate how I feel. I can't stand this. I'm going to kill myself anyway, so why don't I get drunk? A thought that is on me all day that says, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink until it feels like I finally give in and I take that first drink. And it's a thought that is the case of the suddenlies. I'm out there living my life. I have a drink in my hand and I do not know how it happened. That is the obsession of the mind. So it is a hopeless condition of mind, and it says, and body. Now, the hopeless condition of body, what you can write is the allergy of the body or the phenomenon of craving. And that is what happens to me once I take a drink. So the obsession of the mind happens when I am sober, and the allergy of the body happens once I have taken a drink. And the allergy of the body, I take that drink, and that drink takes me. I take a drink, and it demands a second. And that second drink insists on 4. And that fourth drink will not relent until I've had 8. And my 8th drink is screaming at me until I've had 16. And so on and so forth. You see, I take a drink and I get thirstier. I take a drink and I need another, and I need another, and I need another. And I drink myself beyond lines in the sand I said I would never cross. I drink myself into consequences I never wanted to end up in. I drink myself into a life that is absolutely unrecognizable to me. And it is important I understand both symptoms, the obsession and the allergy. because those two things together make this a hopeless condition. The allergy of the body means that there will never be a time when I can ever safely drink again. That's what the allergy of the body means. If I got the allergy, I've got the allergy. And I can't control the amount that I take once I start to drink. And I don't know if it's going to set off every single time, but let me tell you, it sets off more often than not, and it burned my life to the ground. So the allergy means that I can never drink again. But here's the thing. The obsession of the mind means that I will drink again. I will drink again. So the allergy means I have to stay sober. The allergy means I need to stay sober. Heck, the allergy means I want to stay sober. But the obsession of the mind means I can't stay sober. And that's what drives this hopeless condition. And so when we talk about what it means to be recovered, the obsession of the mind is gone. And if the obsession of the mind is gone, I don't take that first drink. And if I don't take that first drink, I don't set off the allergy. That's what we're talking about. And again, how do I get to a place where the obsession is gone? How do I get to a place where I am recovered? That is the purpose of all 12 steps. That's what I need to do to get to our solution. And I point this out because when I get here, I think all I got to do is stop drinking. That's what I got to do. I got to get sober. But sobriety, this is important. Sobriety is not a solution to my alcoholism, because every time I took that first drink, I was sober. And man, if you're like me, sober's not fun. Untreated sober's not fun. Oh, it's not fun for me. It's not fun for my loved ones. It's not fun. And so what I need is a solution. And that's what we have on offer. So we're talking about, doubtless you are curious to discover how and why in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it. Now, that's a place where we can stop. Do I think I am an alcoholic? Do I have examples in my life of those two symptoms? Examples of when I started to drink and I lost control and I overdrank and I drank too much. And do I have examples of my life where I said I don't want to drink and I drank again? Do I think that's me? And do I want to get over it? Again, I can hold that up to, do I want to? It's okay if you don't. This is all consensual. We're not going to make anyone do nothing. But do I want to get over it? And it says, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? And you can almost hear this like being read as like a ʻəlyə́lāt, where it's just like, what do I have to do? Like a bewailing of like hopelessness. Like, because if I see what it means to be an alcoholic, and I can see those symptoms, man, I am in a hopeless condition. How could I not have that wail of grief? Like, what do I got? And desperation, what do I've got to do? And if you didn't have a ʻəlyə́lāt at that, you'll have one at this. It is the do. What do you mean? I gotta do things? Oh man, action. I gotta take a course of action? Not cool. And it goes on to say, it is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. So the sole purpose of the book that we are reading, Alcoholics Anonymous, which we called the big book, the sole purpose of it is to specifically answer the question, what do I have to do to go from that hopeless place to the hope and the solution in step 12? What do I have to do? And that's why we're studying it. That's why we're going through it, because this is going to give us the directions of the course of action that we need to take. And so that's important. That's what the purpose of this book is. And here's something else. It says, we shall tell you what we have done. We shall tell you what we have done. So this is not like this course of action. that like some smarty pants scientists were like, I just imagine like drunks as little lab rats and they're trying to make us go through a maze. And it's like, well, it appears that the alcoholics need to do this and this and this and this. And this is how you will achieve recovery and no longer need to imbibe upon intoxicants. That's not a scientist's voice. That's my pretentious old-timey voice. I did the wrong voice. I don't know what my scientist voice is. I don't have one, apparently. No, all the directions that are outlined in this book are a report of actions taken. We will tell you what we have done. So the 12 steps are saying, this is the course of action we took. Now, whenever I talk about the we, well, it points to the first 100 members, but I always want to emphasize the more of us who take this course of action are the more of us that are included in the we, right? And so the 12 steps are not something that somebody thinks you should do. The course of action, the 12 steps are what those of us who have recovered have done. And that changes the dynamic, you know? Here's what, because I'm sure as alcoholics, you guys might have had a time or two, non-alcoholics, telling you what you should do about your life. Typically unsolicited. Now, to be fair, if I did break their coffee table by crashing into it and passing out, they maybe can tell me a thing or two. But again, one of the most harmful things is to take advice, or actually to take, let me correct myself, to take opinions of people who have no experience. Because non-alcoholics are going to say things like, well, you just got to throw yourself into work. You just got to really try hard. Why don't you have a fruit smoothie? Help put vodka in it. These advices, and they sound plausible. They sound like they make sense if I don't understand the nature of alcoholism. And so these directions are not somebody who has no experience. It is the lived experience of the first 180 members. And then it is the lived experience of all of us who have recovered. That's what we're talking about. And it says, before we go into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. Now, this summary of points is exactly what I'm talking about. People who have no experience and have opinions on what we should do. And so it says, how many times have people said to us, I can take it or leave it alone? Why can't he? Why don't you just take your alcohol or leave it alone? Why you always got to go back to it? Because they don't have the obsession of the mind. And that's what I'm going to do. The questions really are probably more rhetorical, but I am just going to retort to that rhetorical question. Why am I like this? I've done a lot of inventory, I do know. So, why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? Pinkies up like a lady. Now, I was behind the dumpster with wet pants doing some non-conference approved dry goods like a lady, but pinky was out. So why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? Well, the allergy of the body means I cannot drink like a lady or a refined human being, a sophisticated person. And so the allergy of the body means I can't drink like a gentleman, and the obsession of the mind means that I cannot quit. That's why. Then it says, that fellow can't handle his liquor. Accurate. Accurate, And if you're wondering, wait a minute, I could drink people under the table. Handling one's liquor means going for a couple drinks and not burning their life to the ground. That means both shoes and dry pants every single time. That's what that means. Can't relate, So I can't handle my liquor. And why? Because of the allergy of the body. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. So substitutions. Anyone here try to switch to beer and wine? Try to switch the softer stuff. Why does that not work? The allergy of the body. Because when I get alcohol in my system, it demands more. Doesn't matter how little it is. And it says his willpower must be weak, which that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like, because I swear up and down, I will never drink again, only to go back to it again and again and again. And when it comes to the first drink, that it's true that I don't have any willpower, and that is because of the obsession of the mind. There is no amount of willpower that can keep me sober. But I will say, it takes a lot of willpower to scrape yourself up off the bathroom floor and do a shift at work when you're hungover so you can get enough money to drink again. That takes some willpower. So I will say we do have willpower. It's just ineffective against the inevitable first drink. So it says he could stop if he wanted to. How often have we been told or thought, even of other alcoholics, they just don't want it enough? Well, the reason I cannot stop based solely on desire is because of the obsession of the mind. No matter how much I need to, no matter how much I want to, I can't stay sober. I get dragged into that first drink again and again and again. And it says, she's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. Now, here's what I want to do just for a moment. Indulge me, if you will. I want to take off my Al-Anon hat, and I want to go take off my alcoholic hat, and I want to grab my Al-Anon hat, and I just want to be, I am such a sweet girl. You'd think he'd stop for my sake. All right, I'll take that hat off. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. But here's the thing. I love people in my life. I love my family. My alcoholic partner, I did love him. Looking back, I'm not sure why, and he was an alcoholic, and I desperately wanted him to get sober, more than I wanted to get sober, because he had the problem, and I could not stay sober for him. I can't stay sober out of love. That's the power of this thing, and the reason is the obsession of the mind. And it says the doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Fear, warnings, health problems, all of those would be sufficient for other people. But I can't stay sober on fear. You can for a little bit, but not for very long. It does not work. And the reason is the obsession of the mind. So it says, now these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they haven't experienced. It goes on to say, we see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. So non-alcoholics do not experience the allergy of the body. They have no idea what that's like. They might have gotten tipsy a time or two, tore one off one Halloween. But if you ask a non-alcoholic for a drinking story, isn't it like, that sounds like a regular Tuesday, for somebody like us? But also, they do not have the obsession of the mind. Those are the people who, if they are on antibiotics, they don't drink because the doctor told them not to, and they're able to do that, and it's not a problem. They won't bemoan or bewail the entire time, like we will if we're able to do it. But more often than not, I was like, I'm not taking those. I'm just going to keep drinking. So it says, their expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different than ours. And one of the things I want to talk about is that's why we focus so much in step 1 on the obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body, because that is what differentiates us from non-alcoholics. Non-alcoholics will also have the spiritual malady, and that is what we are going to treat with the spiritual awakening. That is what the 12 steps allow us to experience freedom from. But we are emphasizing what makes us different so that we can understand the hopelessness of the predicament that we're in. And I also feel called to talk about, I have to have this experience with alcoholism. But just as much is the experience of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous, these 12 steps, the spiritual awakening, it is not intellectual, it is experiential. And bear with me, this is how I know. Before those of us who have done a 5th step, before we did a 5th step, and those of you who haven't done a 5th step yet, what do you think is going to happen on the 5th step? We think it's going to be the worst thing that ever happened, the worst thing that could ever happen. Similarly, what do we think is going to happen before we make any amends if we haven't ever made an amends or we have amends yet to do, what do we think is going to happen before them? We think it's not going to go well. And just like with step 4 and step 5, I think it's not going to help. You don't understand. It couldn't possibly fix me. It's too much. It's going to go bad. I know how it's going to go. Blah, 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 blah. Right? I got all my nope. But those of us who have taken this course of action, what do we know on the other side to be true? You know, the 9th step promises talk about amazed. The 5th step promises talk about delighted. This thing is experiential. It's an experience. And so that's what I want to lean into, is who is having that experience that can help lead me through this book to have an experience. It's experiential. So it says we see that these refer to people whose reactions are very different than ours. Now, what we're going to dive into is the 3 types of drinkers. We're going to talk about the moderate drinker, we're going to talk about the hard drinker, and then we're going to talk about the real alcoholic. So the moderate drinker. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely. If they have a good reason for it, they can take it or leave it alone. So moderate drinkers, what do they not have? They don't have an allergy. They don't have an obsession. They're the people that'll take their antibiotics. They're the people that things like, it's a little pricey at the restaurant. I don't think I'm going to drink today. You know what I mean? I'm like, if it's a little pricey to drink, I'm avoiding food. That's just more to come up during the spiritual prayer position that happens at around 2 a.m. where I'm praying to the porcelain gods. If you know what I'm talking about, you know. Ooh, I had no problem with prayer when I'm puking out the evening. You know what I mean? No problem with God then. All right. So they've got no allergy and they've got no obsession. Alcohol, it doesn't do anything to them and it doesn't do anything for them. They could take it, they could leave it alone. It's not a big deal. Does that sound like us? We just hold our experience up to the light. Does that sound like us hanging out on Wednesday? I don't think so. And it says, then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. But here's the difference. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate. Although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. So the hard drinker is somebody, if they are given, they might look like an alcoholic. And maybe you might know some people that that might fit into this. We're not diagnosing people, but just in your brain, where they were given a sufficient reason. And they were either able to stop completely or suddenly they were able to drink responsibly. Now we can hold our experience up to that light. Have we ever had sufficiently? Now they weren't sufficient for us, but have we ever had ill health as a result of our drinking? Or even ill health can not just be like liver problems, kidney problems, but it can, or stomach problems, gastrointestinal issues, but it can also be those injuries. We find ourselves in the ER or the A&E, as I believe it's called over there. I think. I said that with confidence, and then I lost all confidence. Thank you. I lost all confidence in that. I'm like, wait a minute. That used to be a TV channel. Wait a minute. So that can also be the injuries that we sustained as a result of our drinking. Have we had any of those? Because for a non-alcoholic, they will go to the hospital for alcohol poisoning and think, boy, that's not pleasant. I'm not going to do that again. Does that sound like me? What about falling in love? Love in a relationship, maybe even having kids. Has that ever been enough for me to stay permanently sober? And then, have we ever had the change of environment, the good old geographic cure? Have we ever tried different methods or different modules of staying sober, going to treatment, going to sober living, going to detox, going to the psych ward, trying different versions of therapy, trying different medications? Have we tried those things? And have they not worked? And then it ties in the warning of a doctor. Were there people who told me I should quit, I need to quit? And have I not been able to? Have I been facing consequences and been unable to stay sober? That's the difference between the real alcoholic and a hard drinker. Is no matter how much I need to, no matter how much I want to, no matter how much I have to, I cannot achieve permanent contented sobriety. I go back to it again and again and again. That's the difference. Does that sound familiar? Now it says, but what about the real alcoholic? Now I love this because this is another example of the book meeting us where we're at, meeting us in our yeah buts, meeting in us in our like not being open, not being willing. It says, what about the real alcoholic? And it says he may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not be a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, and I will point out, only an alcoholic's going to make a career out of it. I tell you, I was not just doing a 9 to 5. I was burning the midnight oil on that overtime, with my career. I was not climbing the corporate ladder. I was sliding down to the corporate bottom is what that was. Found myself in the basement. All right. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. And so when I talk about the allergy and when I talk about the obsession, if you're like me, what you're doing is you're listening and you hear, there was that time back in 2008, back in 2006, back in 2001, back in 98, back in 76, back in 89, where I had 3 drinks like a lady and my pants were dry and I had both shoes. We're remembering those exceptions to the rule. And I think, no, I'm not an alcoholic. There was this time, and maybe there was even a period in our life where we were able to drink responsibly. But what is my lived experience now? See, when it says he may start off as a moderate drinker, I might have started as a moderate drinker. But have I passed to that place? What is my experience today? Is my experience today that I don't have control once I start? And is my experience today that when I want to stay sober, I can't? Is that my experience today? So for some of us, we think of the progression. And it's important to be like, just because I was able to stay sober for a year, or I was able to stay sober for 6 months, or maybe I had lengthy stretches of sobriety, what is my experience today? And I want to point something out. If you're here today and you're like, no, I'm sober, but your knuckles are getting a little white. And if you're here today and you're like, but I'm staying sober, and the thoughts are coming in your mind that I don't need to be here anymore, that it's a little bit too much. The volume on the world is a little too loud. And I just want to turn it down. I don't want to turn it down. I just want to turn it off. Turning it down would be drinking. Turning it off would be I don't need to be here anymore. If you're there today, that's a sign that I've got the obsession of the mind, even if I've been sober a little while. You see, all my alcoholism wants is one more drink, just one more drink. I mean, that's not too much to ask, is it? That's not too expensive, is it? It's only going to cost everything that I have, everything that I love, everything that I am, but that's not too much, is it? And if it can't get another drink, it'll settle for me dead. At least that's been my experience. So does that sound like me? And when it talks about, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. What we're talking about there is the allergy of the body. Once I start to drink, do I have that experience where it sets off and I can't control it? Is that my experience today? Today. even if I was able to. I remember I was working with a sponsee one time, and we concluded. Now, with a dispassionate view, you'll be able to see the humor in this. We were able to conclude that at the age of 9 years old, she was a moderate drinker. You know, at 9 years old, she had a little bit of control and a little bit of choice at 9, and you know, right? And then maybe around 15 it was 14. She fell into hard drinker. And then by like 16 or 17, she was a real alcoholic. But that's the thing. It is I'll chase my 9-year-old experience with alcohol. No, at 9 years old, I was able to control it. And some of us are like, no, I wasn't. Doesn't matter if you didn't start drinking at 9, but you know what I mean? And then we wonder why Harry Tebow called us emotionally immature. Rude. You know, I'm just chasing an experience I had when I was 9 years old. So, is that my experience today? And so it goes on to say, here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. So again, we talk about control, we talk about the allergy. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. And when we say incredible, that word at the time was not incredible as how wonderful. Because I'll tell you, not once in my life did I ever go on a 3-week bender and like get a Nobel Peace Prize. That it wasn't incredible. I didn't go on a bender and win a Tony, you know, that didn't happen to me. Oh, part of me, my brain, here's what my brain wanted to do. There's a British award, and I can't remember the name of it, and I was going to sneak it in, but I completely forgot what it's called. So you don't get that reference. I apologize. But the incredible is the scope. Yeah, the BAFTA! Oh, the BAFTA. You don't get your BAFTA. Yes! Thank you, Rob. He's on it. Yeah. Oh. So I didn't win a BAFTA, is all I'm saying. Oh, all right. So incredible is in the scope. And so when we think incredible, we think like Incredible Hulk, you know, rather than incredible in another way. And it says, and is that my experience? It'll go on to say he is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And you know what I'm going to do is, because we're kind of at the time, you know, and I'm not going to finish this paragraph today. We're going to come back to this. But what I'll leave us with is the story of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde is a perfect analogy for I'm telling us now because I'm starting. I was trying to wind myself down, but I ended up winding myself back up. Peppa, I'll wrap up after this story, and then I'll probably tell the story next week because I love it. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's a beautiful metaphor for the illness that is alcoholism. And it is rumored that Robert Louis Stevenson, he wrote that book as a metaphor for his own addiction. And so in the story, there's this gentleman. Now, it's kind of told more as a mystery, but I'm going to break through. Spoilers on this great piece of Scottish literature. My bad. Don't mean to spoil it. But there's this gentleman, and his name is Dr. Hyde. And he wanted to have that experience of where he could just do bad, you know, like that fun and like just let loose and cut wild. And that's what he wanted to do. And he created this potion. Now, when I say potion, it was more of a powder, but he created this potion where he would take the potion and it would be like he would split, and he physically even looked like this different person, Mr. Hyde, and he could go and do bad and have fun, and he would go and he would do it again and again and again. But then he started losing control as Mr. Hyde, and he started doing things he didn't want to do, and started terrorizing people in ways he didn't want to terrorize them. And so what in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, what was his problem? His problem was, despite all the consequences, he went back to it. He could not stop himself from turning into Mr. Hyde. And at the end, spoilers, at the end of the story, he becomes entirely Mr. Hyde, where there is no separation and there was no hope. So my problem is that as an alcoholic is not that I cannot control the amount that I take. My problem as an alcoholic is, despite that, the obsession of the mind compels me to go back to it again and again and again. Now, Robert Louis Stevenson, his grandfather designed all the lighthouses in Scotland. That's just a fun fact, but I think it ties in nicely. So every lighthouse in Scotland was designed by Robert Louis Stevenson's grandfather. And I think that's a beautiful metaphor, because I come here and I get transformed into that lighthouse. You see, my responsibility is to shine that light so bright that those who are in danger, those who are in the rocks, those who are in, the dangerous waters can find safe passage. And it's not my light. It is the light of a power beyond myself that I get to shine to others. That's what we get to experience here. And I was going to wind down and I only gave you 2 minutes left. I'm sorry, Peppa. So I'll wrap it up there and I'll toss it over to you.